You're listening to My Inner Teacher with Peter Sterios and Krystal Ariel. The answers you seek are within you.
I started talking to you a little bit last week about how I found you, Mana, and I'm a yoga teacher. I studied yoga for the past 10 years, not very long, but lately I've started going into these new movements that I don't know what to call them, and then one day your video, your advertisement for your course popped up on my feed, and I was like, oh, this is such a great reflection of what my body is asking me to do. And it got me thinking, like, are we tapping into this ancient wisdom that we're all collectively connected to? And then this morning, before we logged on, I saw you post a video of you birthing your daughter. And I just thought it was so badass. Like, there's no sound except for the sounds of the water in the pool, your voice, the shrieking, crying, excitement, euphoria, like all mixed into one. And it just gave me goosebumps. And I know it's her birthday today, so happy birthday to your daughter.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess why don't we start with, do you think this inner truth is something ancient that we are all collectively connected to? Or where does it come from for you?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And, when we talk about it in that way, these kind of like ancient codes that we're all connected to, it sounds very mysterious and kind of very cosmic, which it is. But at the same time, it's really just the most natural thing ever. And I think this is really what's happening is, popular culture and technology and advancements. It's amazing, but it does bring us further and further away from what's actually just really natural, which is the natural world, which is, this human body of flesh and bone, which is these rites of passage that are the most actually normal thing, like giving birth. Giving birth is phenomenal, and it's just so beautiful, and it's something that happens thousands and thousands of times every single day, and is something as women that we're born to do, just like every other animal. So it's an interesting thing because it sounds very big, this kind of like return to what's ancient, but at the same time, it's actually returning to simplicity, returning to the way things are supposed to be, the way we're supposed to be in relationship to ourselves, to our bodies, to the natural world, to really be part of that natural world and not something that's separate from it. So I think that when we view something like a woman giving birth in a way that feels really empowering, there's something that really resonates in the deepest part of who we are, just the way that you felt in the movement, or when you saw me moving in these natural patterns. There's something that touches this part of ourselves that just knows that that is really, at the foundation of who we are as humans.
Do you find the traditions of movement are particularly oriented towards the feminine body versus, like, did you teach men dance, or is it mostly a woman audience that you teach to?
I focus on women because I enjoy working with women, but that is definitely not to say that this is not available for men or useful for men. If we look at feminine, masculine, there's a big difference between feminine and masculine energy versus male and female. And so what we're working with here in the movement is returning to the balance of the energetics of the feminine and masculine energy, which every body has. It doesn't matter what your gender is. It's something that we all really need, actually, is that inner harmony. As far as traditional dance, that's a wide scope. For example, I trained classical ballet my whole life. I started training classical ballet when I was 3 years old. And, in a way, it is a very feminine art form because it's about grace and, looking weightless and just floating around and just being these like very graceful beings. Yet it's an incredibly masculine discipline in just the rigidness of it and the discipline that's required, and also, you know, in a way, the linear aspect of it, of the lines and the angles and the correct positions. And so in a way, yes, it is very feminine, and in a way, no, it's actually a very masculine practice. And I'd say that's true with a lot of kind of technical structured dance practices. There is this kind of mix between, you know, it being an art form, it being feminine, but also there being a lot of that masculine structure and linear energy to it.
Sure. I've often been on panels or round tables at conferences and festivals where this conversation of the masculine and feminine principles in human beings comes up. And it, you know, obviously it's a fashionable topic right now to talk about gender. What I know from a yogic point of view is that we're, in a way, up for yogis, it's a journey that's non-binary. You know, like it's beyond this identification with one gender or the other. It's a union. And for me, that helps this conversation. I oftentimes wish that let's say my physical body was a little more feminine, because I'm attracted to the way your movement on the videos that I've watched, and same with Krystal's movement. There's a grace, as you talked about, that I don't think my body is capable of, but energetically, I'm very capable of those inner experiences just through the eyes, through watching. And I think that's this wonderful thing about grace. Is grace, to me, it's part of the title of my book, Gravity and Grace. Grace is this non-physical attraction, this energy that pulls energies together that are non-physical. And as a dancer dancing gracefully, I have that visceral experience in my body as if I was dancing. And I've noticed this on a yoga mat as well, that this, you know, inspiration that comes from watching a senior or advanced teacher of yoga or practitioner do these amazing shapes with strength and flexibility and grace, it transmits energetically into my body. And when I get on a yoga mat, I look for that same energy through my own experience, through my own. I just watched a video of yours, and it was testimonials from some of your students. And they were talking this language that I use, softness, and creating space, and taking this energy from the dance out into life. Can you talk more about that? Like how, you know, softness is a interesting word. It implies a certain level of fluidity, but also it's kind of associated with weakness. And I'm curious how you look at that.
Yeah. Before I talk about softness, I do want to just say about the grace topic is I totally agree. For me, grace is a lot like beauty. It's an energetic quality, and that quality can manifest in a lot of different ways on the physical realm. And so when we see someone, you know, in a state of grace, it really is that starting point of the energy that's flowing within manifested in clarity and authenticity as the way it comes out. So, you know, there could even be grace in something that's wild, or even like an ugly movement, or a, you know, a more kind of raw expression. But there's something about the surrender into the authenticity and the fluidity that is what really transmits that energy of grace or of beauty. And so I really agree with you on that, of, you know, tuning back into the energetics of it, of how we're using the body as a vessel to just bring that flow that's inside out into the world around us. And I think that ties really beautifully into this idea of softness. You know, for me, the idea of softness is our capacity to, on a physical level, first of all, release tension, allow an actual physical softening of the tension in the body. So muscular squeezing. And it's something that most humans hold without even knowing we're doing it, right? We're all clenching our jaw a little bit, or squeezing our shoulders a little bit, or sucking in our tummy a little bit. It's like we hold these micro tensions, and for some people, macro tensions, all the time. And most people aren't even aware of it. And of course, if you practice something like intentional movement or yoga or embodiment practices, this is a big piece of what we start with, starting to notice, what am I holding? Where am I squeezing? Where are these points of tension? And starting to release that and become aware of it. So for me, the softening starts there. How can we start to become aware of these micro tensions that we're holding, which is no fault of our own, right? It's what we have to do to kind of survive life, to move through the world feeling safe and protected and able to kind of move at the pace that we're being asked to move. But when we're holding these tensions, those physical blockages do a few things. One, they continue to increase over time. They continue to create more physical blockages. We start to feel stiff. We start to feel achy. We start to feel heavy. Maybe we start to have physical injuries. They kind of, compound over time. And then on an energetic level, when we're holding tension in the body, it's not allowing the energy to flow through us as it naturally wants to. Like I was just speaking about, we have this immense amount of life force energy that's moving within us, and it wants to flow out. It wants to be expressed. And when we have these micro tensions in the body, it's blocking that flow. And so a lot of the movement work that I'm doing is for the purpose of starting to gently unwind the body, starting to just softly and gently release these tensions so that we can return to that natural flow of life force energy that wants to move through us. That is what mana is. Mana is that flow of life force energy. And so the softening is that. How can we soften the hardness? How can we soften the tension so that we can just return again to our natural state, the way that we're meant to be?
So I'm going to ask you that question. How do you soften hardness? Before you answer, listening to you talk, it's like you're reading pages from my book. Because my book is about gravity being this external attraction, physical attraction, and grace, this internal attraction towards beauty. Mm-hmm. And have you done, here, one little quick question. Have you done yoga?
I have probably taken maybe 5 yoga classes in my entire life.
Fantastic. No, that's fantastic, because to share so many things, in terms of these qualities of being and finding language to communicate in a simple way to your students or to the people that coming to you to learn. We both, you and I, have arrived in very similar places at what I call subconscious grip. Subconscious grip is those tensors that kind of happen over time usually, or through some trauma that's kind of you're beyond, that stay resident in the tissue. And I think I'll go back to my question now. Like, I broke my back, and through the process of healing the broken back, I learned how to create softness. And then I noticed it was, you mentioned surrender already. There was a quality of surrender to it, but there was more intentional things that I was doing mentally and physically. And I'm curious, without kind of sharing what I'm curious to hear what you use as a technique for softening.
Yeah. So one of the words used right now is a big part of it, which is intention. There's so much of what we create in our life, in our bodies, in reality, that is 50% intention. Independent of the actions you actually take or the movements you actually do with your body is how you're holding the intention of what wants to happen. Without doing anything else, if I just right now in this moment start to bring in the intention of softening, there's going to be something that happens already. And, that's bringing in this kind of harmony between the mind and the body, right? The power of the mind to hold an intention, to hold a focus to support something that actually is manifesting through the body. So a big piece is that intention. And part of that intention is time and space. And this is something that most people can't afford themselves, right? To take the time to actually lay down on the floor, close their eyes for 5 minutes and not move their body. That is already something that is incredibly difficult for people to do because there's too much to do. Our lives are too busy. There's so many more important things. So that first step of just giving yourself the space, making that choice to say, okay, I am going to, for 5 minutes, do absolutely nothing and just lay on the floor. It's like, this is already really challenging for people. So just being able to action the intention of giving ourselves that space and time to arrive in the body, to allow the mind to soften and to come into that space of intentional presence with ourselves. That is a big piece of the work.
Yeah.
And, this piece around the similarities of what we've learned and the knowledge that we've acquired, you and I, is because yoga and the work that I do, mana movement, they bridge a couple of things. They bridge physical activation, right? We're working with the physical body. They bridge that with the spiritual realm of the meditative work, the presence work, this intentional work. And so I think when we bridge these different things together, then we do eventually kind of come to the same understandings of how we function in the world. So the first step for me is that intention of creating the space and time and holding that desire within ourselves. And then, like I said before, awareness is such a big piece of, do I even know what's happening in my body? Can I even feel? Can I feel like the air on my skin? Can I feel tingling or buzzing? Can I feel like what's happening in my muscles? And for most people, the answer is no, because we're running around, we're in our heads. Most people are somewhat disconnected from their bodies for various reasons. And so even just that awareness piece is such a vital piece of, okay, well, what am I working with? Before I even get to the step of softening, I need to know what I'm working with right now. So starting to deepen that feeling body awareness of being able to feel the sensations in the body, being able to feel where there's tension and holding and blockages.
Yeah.
Hey, quick note. Peter's Inner Teacher Academy is launching soon. If this is resonating with you, head over to innerteacheracademy.com and grab a spot on the wait list. These trainings are intimate and space is limited. So if you want to be first in line, tap the link in the description below and sign up.
You can also see details about my 2025 retreats at some incredible locations around the world, like Iceland, Austria, California, and New Zealand. Attendance at these trainings will count towards in-person hours for the Inner Teacher Academy. And now let's get back to the magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were listing those areas in the body, typically, and you were moving down the body and you stopped, I think, in the belly. And I was hoping that you were going to go a couple layers lower, because for men, it's the sphincter muscles, like tight ass, that expression in the English language is comes from somewhere. And I've never heard two women call each other tight asses. It's mostly an insult that's directed at a man. And why? Because the man's trying to provide for the family and hold on to stuff, and he's probably genetically been programmed to squeeze his sphincter muscles for thousands and thousands of years. To overcome that is one of the hardest things to do.
That's very interesting. That is very interesting. I think we should ask more men about this, because you're the first guy to publicly say this that I've heard. That's
my
very
God,
interesting.
I've talked about tight asses and sphincter muscles for 20 years, and it wasn't until I broke my back that there were parts of my body that were numb. And what causes that numbness? There's psychological reasons and there's physical reasons, but when I broke my back, the lower back, there was a heightened awareness and presence of my mind in and around those areas to avoid pain. And the breath, for me, the breathing is the key. It's kind of the thing that holds all that intention and presence together, because it's a present moment experience. You can't breathe in the future, breathe in the past. And most spiritual traditions emphasize this quality of presence in breathing. That's why the meditations are what they are, is it holds our mind in the present moment. And that present moment has a special place. for me, this pain caused by the injury kept my attention where the pain was. And then as I was breathing each cycle of breath, I began to notice that on the inhale, the pain was intense. And on the exhale, the pain was a lot less. And eventually it became where the pain on the inhale was manageable and the pain on the exhale was gone. And so that was this beginning of awareness of what that experience of pain-free felt like. And you know what it felt like? Spacious. Like that spaciousness that comes from releasing grip. And that was the key for me in my process. Okay, now let me go lower. And because I was kind of aware of this sphincter tendency in men, because I'd been called a tight ass so much in my life that it had me, aware of that. Oh, I wonder where that comes from. So then I started to realize if I softened my sphincter muscles, how? With visualization to begin with. And I didn't immediately feel it, but I'd read enough about the neuroscience of feeling that if I used my mind to create the visualization, that it tricked the parasympathetic response in the body to actually cause the physical release. And so then once I started feeling this physical release in the sphincter muscles, then I had more control with intention of going in there. Oh yeah, it's tight. Okay, let's go. Let it go, And the yogis have these special places in the body, the chakras they call them. And all I see these places, they're very important anatomical places in the body with nerve plexes and endocrine gland concentrated energies. And so for me, it was just, okay, let me try this technique in all these different areas of the body. And to my wonderful surprise, I had the same experience around the heart, around the throat, around the face, mostly the third eye. Even the crown of the head started to kind of create a sensitivity for me. Like the scalp started tingling, and there were things going on that I was formerly unaware of. So from a yogic perspective, it's very similar in a way to what you're describing in dance. And that's a beautiful thing. I'm really wonderful to hear this conversation go in this direction. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
I love that. And, I think for women, the kind of related squeezing is probably in the pelvic womb space. This is where women hold a lot of trauma around sexual trauma, around just the receptivity of the womb space is, kind of similar to that energy probably of, also these other sphincters, which is the throat and the breath being such a big piece of that connection point to relax the sphincter of the throat. And this is why in my practice, we always use inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth as a way to consciously open that, especially for women, having the voice open and the throat open. And so all of these energetic centers connected to the physical centers are also holding a level of squeezing and tension. And so we're always working with both, right? We're always working with the energy body and the physical body and how they can work together and dance together. And for women, a lot of that work has to do with the pelvis, the hips, the womb space, the yoni, and really consciously relaxing and opening that area of the body too. And that's why a lot of the movements in my work are these spiraling of the hips, right? We start at the root, we bring that energy up, we expand it through the crown, and we're clearing not only through the spine, not only through, the length of the physical body, but clearing these energy centers, these chakras with these movements and really working that softening at all of these different levels.
Where did you learn that? Like, that wasn't taught in a dance class, was it?
No, it wasn't. My path has been very nonlinear as well. I I'm obsessed with personal development, and I'm a very curious human. So I've kind of dabbled in a lot of different modalities. I've dabbled in a lot of different kind of spiritual teachings. I've dabbled in, breath work and different kinds of movement and dance and Vipassana meditations and Tantra, and kind of dipped my fingers in a lot of different things. And that accompanied by just my obsession with self-exploration, like getting onto the floor and closing my eyes and just spending hours moving my body and seeing what I can discover. So I think there's been a lot of different pieces that have come in. And then, as we spoke about at the beginning, there's this kind of like ancient cosmic wisdom that we are all connected to anyways. It's why you and I, again, come to the same conclusions of how we work in the world. So it's been a long journey of taking myself a lot of different places and kind of bringing all of these different pieces together and really seeing what resonates with me. There's a lot of different lines of knowledge. There's a lot of different ways of thinking. And I feel like I'm constantly trying to find which pieces resonate with me and just rooting deeper into those truths.
Inner teacher, we're using those two words together to kind of direct people's attention inward, and also to the awareness that there's a intelligence found when you move your attention inward. What was that aha moment? Do you have a specific aha moment when you realized that all the things you were learning outside was just kind of guiding you towards this inner authority?
I've had a couple aha moments. The first aha moment was my first Vipassana meditation retreat of going 10 days in silence. And at that point, I had never done any sort of spiritual work ever, but it was free. And I was like, I need something because I had just graduated college and I was like, I have no idea where to go. So I need to just like do something to help me kind of clear my mind. And so I went into that experience not knowing anything about it. It was literally like the hardest thing I've ever.
Yeah. It's that Vipassana is like jumping off a cliff.
Absolutely. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. Every day I was like, I want to leave. I want to leave. But they take your keys. They take your phone.
Or if you're in India.
And I made it through, and on the other side, of course, I was just like, holy shit, like, what is this? This is, something I've never felt before. And so that was a big initiation for me, and really got me very curious about going deeper into meditation and connecting with myself in that way. So that was one. The second aha moment for me was when I discovered ecstatic dance. I don't know if you've ever been to an ecstatic dance before.
I've done it. Yeah.
And
I'll add.
And when I discovered ecstatic dance, I was in a really dark time of my life. I was in a very toxic relationship. There was a lot of pain that I was experiencing and navigating. And ecstatic dance became my therapy. Twice a week, I would go there. I would spend the first hour laying on the floor and just processing emotions, crying, screaming, whatever I needed to do in movement. And that really it saved my life, to be honest. I don't know what I would have done without that space, because I didn't know what else to do with my emotions. We aren't really taught how to process things. And I was lucky enough to have the depth of my understanding of dance and movement, all of the different ways I could move my body, just having that level of kinesthetic awareness to be able to express all of the emotions that wanted to come through movement and dance. And that was really the experience that made me realize, like, this is a thing. Movement is medicine. Like, if people can learn how to express their emotions in a healthy way through the expression of their body, like, this heals so much. And that got me really curious and passionate about how I could make it accessible for more people, because not everyone's a dancer. Not everyone wants to go to ecstatic dance, but everyone has a body and everyone can, move their body to some capacity. And so that really was where my whole business kind of birthed of, okay, how do I create structures and accessibility for anyone who wants to experience movement as a form of healing medicine?
That's the exact same approach I took to the practice of yoga after I recovered from my back. It doesn't matter the level of fitness or experience in yoga. As a matter of fact, because the word yoga has been overused currently, in kind of contemporary society, I even feel a little uncomfortable talking about yoga. I call sometimes yoga inspired movement, because most of the shapes that I learned recovering from a broken back don't have names. And so it wasn't like I could just say, do triangle pose and call it good. Do triangle pose and shavasana and go home and take a nap. That wasn't part of the equation. So I started to create these micro movements of, let's call it, different areas in the body, using gravity as the catalyst for movement. And it requires, this is getting back to grace, it requires that surrender that you, in a way, you've talked about. When you surrender, the subconscious grip loosens and the image of softening, you feel this inner spaciousness in your body, that feeling in yoga, ananda, bliss, little moments of bliss invite you to move. And so instead of this kind of typical yoga approach of mentally imposed stretching or muscular effort to create space, it's more movement by invitation, softening, surrendering, creating space, where gravity catalyzes movement. And because that feels good, you engage and you move in. And the beautiful thing for me in this approach to yoga is yoga starts where you're at. It doesn't matter how flexible you are. It doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter how stressed out you are. You just start where you're at. And there's these practices anyone can do. Again, I feel like you and I are on parallel tracks going in the same place in a way. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I appreciate your explanation of your philosophy around it, because to be honest, I have, there's a reason I've only ever taken 5 yoga classes in my whole life.
It's complex. Yeah, it's complex.
Yeah. My experience of yoga is that, it was actually quite painful on my body because I'm very flexible. And I found that I needed to tense a lot to hold these particular positions. And it was just very effortful, to a point where I was like, this is not what my body needs. We're already tensing so much at every other moment of our lives, that it just didn't feel really in alignment with what my body needed. And there are many, many women who come into my work with the same reflection of, they're coming from a long yoga background. Many of them are yoga teachers that go through my teacher training. And they've gotten to this point where they're like, there's something that doesn't feel aligned with the way my body actually wants to move. And when they feel this circular spiraling movement that I'm offering, they feel that resonance of, oh, this is how my body wants to move, not more linear, not more masculine, not more tension, which is what a lot of people experience in yoga. So I'm very happy to hear your perspective, because for sure it's exactly parallel to what we're doing in my work, which is the surrender, which is learning to move from a place of release and softness versus tension and holding. And then that's a fractal of life, right? That's a fractal of how we're going to move through our life, of being able to align more with the natural flow, more surrender, more of that softness versus like trying to control and squeezing and forcing and pushing. And again, like we spoke from the beginning, just realigning with the natural flow as it moves within us in our own body, and also as it moves us through every moment of our life.
Are you, in the back of your mind, are you thinking about a book?
I'm sure somewhere in there, there's that thought.
I think you should write one. I really do. I wasn't thinking of writing a book when the publisher said, would you write a book for us? And it kind of forced me to look at it and to step into it, to be honest. And I'm biased now because you're speaking my language, but you've got a lot to offer beyond just the dance community. You know, like I can see, and a book is kind of a symbol in a way of stepping up and just putting it out there and see how it goes. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, writing a book, and I do compare it. I was at my daughter's birth, you know, and I watched what my wife, we'd had a home birth, and so I know this expression. It felt like childbirth getting my book out, and yeah, it was a a 3-year labor, you know, instead of a 9-month labor. But I feel like there's something, there's a seed in this conversation maybe for you that, who knows, maybe you'll say, "Yeah, I was on that podcast and
I am a creature of creation. It's like I can't not create. I remember after my daughter was born, I was like, okay, I'm going to take 2 months off. I'm not going to think about work. I'm not going to create anything. I'm just going to be here with my baby, which I was. But it's like my mind just, it does not stop. So I'm sure that seed is there.
Yeah.
To be honest, I feel very young. I feel very young in my field and in my process with my work. And it's been such a natural unfolding of how I've gotten to where I am. And I've had no goal in mind. I've had no expectation of what I'm going to create. And for the longest time, up until maybe a year ago, I wouldn't even consider myself a business owner or an entrepreneur or anything like that. Like, I just was so devoted to art and creation and following those impulses. And somehow it got me to building, you know, a very successful embodiment business. But I still feel, yeah, like I'm at the beginning of it. And so I think there's a maturation that is still needed for me to continue rising into, and then the book will happen.
So I started journaling at a really particularly dark time in my life. Divorce, death, my dog died. You know, one of my businesses closed. So there was all this turmoil in my life, which meant that I didn't sleep much at night. And so I would get up in the middle of the night, and I'd living by myself and practice yoga. And that was the first time that I started to feel the presence of some higher form of intelligence, just dropping little seeds in my mind with a voice. And the voice was softer. It wasn't this kind of hectic, intense, ego-driven voice that said, oh, you got to do that, you should do that, blah, blah, blah. It was more like asking questions. What do you think about this? And so I started journaling. I'd just interrupt my practice. I mean, some nights I'd start practicing around midnight, and I'd practice till I taught in the morning at 6 a.m. And I would just write, and when some insight popped in. Over a 3-year period, that process continued, and writing in these journals. In the end, it was 6 journals, and then they sat on a shelf for 10 years. And during that 10 years, I had a daughter, etc., and life just kind of happened. But it was then this time, and it was the perfect amount of time for me, because like you, my mind was still like thinking about those journals, thinking about language, thinking about how to get them into some other form that I could use, being an entrepreneur myself. But it wasn't until the publisher showed up and said, hey, would you write something? And that was it. That was the call, literally, of me answering this inner teacher's voice to start putting it out there. So that was perfect, brilliant. I think you're right. Just it'll show up for you.
I've really learned to trust, you know, and I think what happens is we take that first kind of leap of faith, lean into trusting, and then we see we don't die. We see that actually we're supported and things open up more. And I think the more we do that, the more that we can trust that, right? Again, it's a surrender process of, okay, I'm just going to continue being present. That's really the work, like you said, coming back to the breath, coming back to this present moment. And when we're in that present moment, anything is possible. We're not limited. And if we can just continue being there, then again, life just opens up and leads us where we're meant to go. Not to say we're not going to have challenges, not to say we're not going to feel all of the emotions and the fear and the rage and the pain, but we can meet it. We can arrive in that moment and know what to do with that in order to continue moving us forward. And so it's definitely the path that I'm absolutely committed to for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well,
I want to
I've
go
said
back
this
really
before.
quick to when we
Yeah,
were
sure.
talking about obstacles and blockages. Since, I mean, because this podcast is about the inner teacher, and a lot of what keeps us, I think, from discovering that inner teacher is that we feel blocked in some way, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically. And since a lot of your work is in the body, and you talked about these tensions creating blockages, I want to know how, in your experience, releasing those blockages has allowed your inner teacher to speak more clearly or in a way where you're more confident in what your intuition is telling you. Is there a relation there? And what has been your experience with that?
So when we talk about blockages, most of the time we're talking about things that are in our mind, right? The blockages that come up in our head of the stories and the fears and the judgments and the criticism and, you know, that like terrible inner critic that just won't shut up ever. And that's really where the blockages are. You know, again, it's like physically we are capable. We're capable of a lot. And the mental blockages are a really interesting piece to work with, absolutely. And what I've found, you know, of course, in the path of embodiment is the best way to work with the mind is to bring it into harmony with the body. And so I think the first piece, like I spoke about before, is reconnection. Most people are blocked from their body. They're disconnected from their body. They can't hear their body. They can't hear what the body's trying to tell them. And they're scared of their emotions. And so they're blocking also their capacity to feel and express emotion. And so what we need to do is work with reconnection, reconnecting to the physical body, reconnecting to the emotional body, the energy body, in order to reconnect with the transpersonal body, our life, the world around us, and be able to, you know, experience more in life. I think a big piece of what we are talking about here is emotional intelligence, of being able to accept, embrace, and express our emotions, which again is something that we are not taught to do. If you look at most babies, they are, you know, shushed or told to stop crying, or parents, you know, think that crying is bad. They don't want them to express their emotions. Toddlers throwing tantrums. They're also getting punished for expressing emotions. And so we're taught from the very beginning that our emotions are bad. We shouldn't be feeling sad. We shouldn't be feeling angry. We shouldn't express those. And that's kind of that. There's nothing else to it. And so for most people, there is a process of needing to really come back to connection with our emotions, to understand what they are, which is energy in motion. Emotions are messengers. They are our body trying to tell us something that's going to help us. Emotions are an invitation to move. It's either expansion or contraction or moving towards something or away something from something. And they're meant to help keep us in balance, to keep us in harmony, and to keep us safe. And so a big piece of this is to reconnect with our emotions as a positive aspect of who we are. To learn how to feel emotions, to feel safe, to feel rage and anger, to learn how to express them in healthy ways, and to ultimately source power from any emotion. If you think about the energy of rage, right? It's this like fire, it's this heat, it's this like this buzzing energy. And if you remove the negative label from that, you can start to understand how that is a massive source of power. This like really intense energy, just like passion, right? And so we actually can source a lot of power from these different types of emotions. And when we become comfortable with our emotions, when we know that no matter what we feel, we can handle it, we're going to be okay, and actually we can use it as power, then we are able to take more risks in life. We're able to, do that thing that's kind of scary because we don't know what's going to happen. And what if I feel like rejected, or I feel shame, or I feel fear? And we know it's okay. Okay, even if I get rejected, even if I get criticized, even if I feel shame or fear, that's fine. I know I can handle that emotion, and actually I can use it to keep moving me forward. So when we are working our emotional mastery, it allows us to experience more in life, to be more playful, to take more risks, to explore more, to try things that we normally wouldn't let ourselves try, because ultimately we feel safe. We feel safe in our body, we feel safe in our emotions, and that creates freedom. We have freedom in our body, we have freedom in our emotions, and we have more freedom in our life. And that's really that liberation piece of, okay, the safer I feel of myself, the more free I'm going to be in my life.
That's a great answer.
Fantastic answer. And I'm going to put a little, I don't know what it is, but I'm feeling called to say this. I have spent many types of spiritual teachers over the course of my life, and I've come to realize that there are basically two types: those that don't have children and those that have children. Yeah, that's a joke, kind of, but it really, there's this commitment that parents make to their own development, let's call it, when they decide to have a child. And, I think the reason that babies come into the world so cute is to just kind of create an environment where you just are going to love them for no reason and just be with them for the rest of their lives. If you're on a spiritual path, on a self-development path, let's call it, that by the time they reach teenage years, there's a certain emotional muscle that you've been able to develop, hopefully, because the teenage years are different. And when I look at parents that have teenagers or grown children, and we connect eyes, there's this understanding, that is nonverbal, like, you survived the teenage years. and especially, is your baby a girl or a boy?
My baby's a girl, but I also have a 9-year-old son. So
Oh, okay. So
I'm
you've been
getting
through.
closer and closer to that
Yeah, yeah.
teenage boy year.
I think boys are easier than teenage girls. That's a sexist bias that I have. I want to believe that anyway. Yeah. In to complete this little joke, what I've found is my daughter's been my guru. My daughter has, through the teenage years, she's really held me accountable for where it's my story, not her story. And we've arrived. She's turning 18 in a couple months, and we've arrived at a place now where there's an acknowledgement of our human frailty. And that we all have these cuts, let's call them, that heal. But we have this ability to return to the center of ourselves and return to the heart space or the belly space and express what is the most important thing. The most important thing is kindness and love, really. And yogically speaking, those two elements are the foundation of this whole practice of yoga. And kindness being this emotional current that moves through the central channel of the spine, and it's the most beneficial heightened state of awareness. For me, that awareness has developed into the visceral experience of when I'm kind or when I receive kindness from others. It brings me to tears. There's this physical response to that energy that's moving in my spine. And it drives every opportunity I have, especially when there's conflict, when there's resistance, to look deeper and to find it, because it's there. It's that ancient ancestry. It's part of us. We just have to awaken to that.
I love that. And I think also the awareness that that kindness and that love starts with ourselves. And I think, you know, this is what I see in a lot of the women that I work with is there is this natural giving energy that a lot of women have. And sometimes it's to the deficit of the kindness and the love they're sending to themselves. And when that happens, it's not sustainable. And so a lot of this work of the inner teacher, turning our attention inwards, is meeting that with ourselves first. How much of that kindness, how much of that love am I giving to myself? How am I speaking to myself? That voice of the inner critic, how often is it negative and how often is it positive? And really turning that kindness and love, you know, activating that channel within ourselves first. And then from there, being able to radiate that out to everyone and everything around us. And this is definitely something I've learned in motherhood with my son. Again, my son is 9. When he was a baby, it was so hard. I was just, again, in this very difficult relationship with his father, and there was a lot of pain and there was a lot of resentment within myself because I didn't have that kindness and love for myself. I had it for my son, absolutely. I was there for him 100%. He was the most precious thing ever. But it was really draining because I didn't have that for myself yet. So this time around with my daughter, it's been such a different experience. And I have to still keep reminding myself of that compassion first for myself, of having the patience, having that love, having that gentleness and softness, directing that to myself first so that I can continue giving from that overflowing cup to my daughter, to my family, to, you know, my clients and to everyone else. So a big piece, you know, of this inner teacher work that I feel is starting there is really learning to be a space holder for ourselves first. How am I holding space for myself? How much presence am I giving myself? Am I giving myself that 5 minutes every day to just lay on the floor and close my eyes and breathe? And starting to really prioritize that time with our own inner teacher before we expect ourselves to be able to give that to anyone else. And if we're in a position of leadership, of course, that becomes even more important so that we can continue giving from that place of authenticity, from really, like you were saying, coming from that heartful place that just makes us feel good about ourselves and is felt by everyone around us as well.
That's beautiful.
Okay, last question. Last question.
Is that yours?
It can be.
Yeah.
Or maybe 2 questions. But there's something I really wanted to ask you. What's something completely unrelated to dance that really brings you simple pleasure or movement?
My children, of course. Again, like you were saying, Peter, my children are my gurus. They are my greatest teachers, and they're like little mirrors too. It's like they're so fun. And they've also really reawakened a childlike joy and playfulness in me that I had lost like quite a lot. So they are absolutely the most precious gift in my life. And I really think everything that I've created, everything I've built, all of the success I've had in my business career is because of my children and just being motivated by them and inspired by them. I mean, my daughter, before she was born, like she's been energetically in my field for years, and she's already inspired so much creation, like videos I've done and dances I've done and offerings I've created where I felt really coming from her energy. So my children and the nature, you know, living in nature, going out, being in the trees, being by the water, going to the river and just like tuning in, like we've talked about this whole time, that natural flow and really aligning with the pulse of nature and just remembering that, yeah, we're all connected in that way. And, you know, no matter what I'm experiencing in life, no matter how heavy or big or intense it feels, there's something greater that's holding all of it together and creating a sense of safety for me. I think that's a big piece of what nature does. It really creates a sense of safety for me in my life and everything I'm moving through.
That. And I feel that too. I also want to acknowledge you for everything that you've talked about has showed up for this conversation. You embody what you're talking about in such a beautiful way. And I see this a lot with the guests that we've hosted so far, that they really aren't just, they're just speaking from a well deep within. And then you see it manifest on the screen. And here we are using technology to feel that. And I don't know, Krystal, you can speak for yourself. I feel like I know you, like I've known you, and I'm just looking at pixels on a screen. It's kind of funny. It's beautiful. Funny, beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a big pleasure to be here with both of you. And again, one of the beautiful things of technology is it's absolutely true. And most of the work I do is online. I'm meeting with women all over the globe and creating these powerful, energetic containers where everyone feels supported and seen and felt and held. And it's really such a gift that we can come together in this way and share space and time and energy. And yeah, remember that we are all really connected. And I just love, all the synchronicities and all the resonance. And yeah, it's definitely been a pleasure to be here with both of you.
That's it for this episode. Be well and stay open to the teacher within. If you've enjoyed our time together, follow or subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming chats you don't want to miss.